what is going on? And so because I came from a very non-traditional background into that role, right, I was like, maybe I'm doing my job wrong.
This podcast is brought to you by Hey Taco, the only peer-to-peer recognition platform that uses tacos to help teams around the world share gratitude. I'm Doug.
I'm Una.
This is our podcast, Amazing Teams. Lisa Lee, welcome to the Amazing Teams podcast.
Thank you for having me, Doug and Una.
Of course.
Lisa, we're excited to have you all the way from Melbourne. Every time I talk to someone in Australia, I always think you're living in the future, so you can tell us what the future holds. But can you please introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself to our listeners?
Absolutely. My name's Lisa. I'm the founder of Learna. I have spent my career in advertising and HR roles. And so now I'm bringing all those learnings into, I guess, like product, brand and ops into the people side of tech.
Well, the topic of our podcast is amazing teams. So we have a lot to talk about and how you have built teams and build teams right now. But first and foremost, what do you think it takes to build an amazing team in 140 characters or less?
I love this question. I'm going to try and stick to 140 characters. I think it's all about, creating a space where learning and trying new things is the norm. And so through that, you're really helping everyone get better and become quite adaptable. But what that requires is really determined leaders. And those leaders are really working to build commitment, I guess, build curiosity and this connection in their team every day. And sometimes that requires a level of change management and a level of coaching. But these leaders, they generally see change as an opportunity and something that's done with people, not to people. And that's what leads them to creating these amazing teams.
When did you learn more about your belief of what creates amazing teams? At which point in your career did this become an aha moment or an insight that you have right now?
It started actually way back when I was working in advertising. I was leading teams then. And I could see that if I could give my team certain skills, that they could really flourish, even if the conditions were tough, the clients were tough, etc. And that sparked my curiosity around how you could actually work to motivate people. Advertising, right, is all about a brand and a target audience. And I started to think, why is this not taken into the business space where the business is a brand and the employee is the customer? And this is way before employee experience was a thing, right? I'm talking about 8-9 years ago. And so through that time, then I started upskilling myself going, hey, maybe there's some more interesting things I can find out. And so I became a certified coach. I was doing behavioral profiling, etc. And it really sparked my curiosity around what motivates humans and how we can get them to take certain actions and belong in a team. And so through that, then I pivoted my career into more operations and HR type roles. And I was in a head of people and culture role in a startup that was growing quite fast. And it was the best job in the world, right? Because they said to me, we have complete trust in you. We think things with the way that we're working are broken and we can do better. So we want to experiment. Off you go. And so that just really fed the beast, didn't it?
That's a pretty blank canvas to start with.
It's amazing. And so through that, it was 3.5 years. It was experimentation, curiosity, questioning the status quo, finding new ways to do things, even if they didn't work. That was okay because we were trying, and you could just feel this buzz, and it was an amazing team.
That's awesome. So you've worked with teams in your past at agencies and advertising, and now you are a founder. I'm so curious. As a fellow founder, how did that happen? Did you just wake up one morning and say, you know what, I want to start my own company? Tell our listeners a little bit about that journey.
Not at all. So when I was working in this head of people and culture role, as I mentioned, it's quite experimental, right? And everyone kept coming at me going, I want more learning opportunities. And I'm like, what? We just did this thing and that thing and you got a coach over here, etc. What is going on? And so because I came from a very non-traditional background into that role, right, I was like, maybe I'm doing my job wrong. Maybe I need to go and talk to a few people and figure out what they're doing and how they're developing their teams and how they're actually getting people engaged with learning. So I believe that learning is quite one of the critical pieces of creating an amazing team. It really helps people become more engaged and effective and confident in their roles. And so I went on this deep dive and I spoke to, I kid you not, almost 100 different business leaders, people and culture leaders going, hey, how are you helping your teams learn? What's going on? Are you having this problem? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, great, what are you doing about it? They're like, well, I mean, we've got, pretty tired platforms and, we send people off and then sometimes it's too expensive. And I'm like, that's not good enough. Like, people need to be able to have these skills in the moment that they need them because, like, fundamentally, I believe learning is problem solving, right? And so I did not intend to create a product. So then I started researching and going, what are the barriers around learning? What are the barriers for people around, how they develop, et cetera, or around problem solving? And then eventually I was like, maybe I'll just build a prototype. And the business that I
Wow.
worked at were amazing. They're like, yeah, you should totally do that. Like, go and test it out with a team, etc. I was so supportive. Then I built this prototype and I started getting this really good feedback. Like, I haven't experienced this before. I love the flow of this. It feels very familiar, etc. And then I remember distinctly like sitting with my boss at a cafe one day and I built this prototype out, tested and everything. And we were talking about future plans for their business. And I said to him, I don't think I can stay. I don't think I can help you grow. And he said to me, and then we both started crying. He's like, you just have to do this. Like, you have to go out there and try it and put it out there and see what happens. And it was like, we're both like sitting in this cafe crying about this opportunity. And then from there, I became a founder, right? And I put it out there and it's been bloody hard work, but it's been worth it.
Gotcha. And how long after your prototype did you have to leave your day job and focus 100% on Learna?
I had to make a big call of like, am I going to invest our savings into building an actual MVP, right?
Okay.
So I did that while I was working. But that span was like the course of a year of me going, there is a real problem here. I'm going to research. I'm going to build a prototype. I'm going to invest and build the MVP. And then I left and launched it the year after.
Gotcha. So you quit your day job before you even had traction.
Yeah. Because I couldn't go out and sell a product while I was working somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, between leaving there in November and then like officially launching in January, I built up 5 customers already, and things just went from there.
That's an awesome story. And I remember, Lisa, when you and I first talked, you said one thing that I'm going to read so I don't butcher it, but I took note of this. And you said, learning is something that is done to you. Problem solving is something you do. I thought that was so interesting. Like, when we think about learning, is you watch a video and you absorb it, right? And that's so passive. So how do you think about, you mentioned problem solving is in the people in culture space, you're problem solving, right? You're always problem solving.
Yes.
How has this thread of problem solving helped you from being in advertising to head of people in HR, which is such an interesting jump, and now to a founder? Well, how does that thread connect everything you do?
I think at the core of it comes back to wanting to understand people. And whether that's from an advertising or a brand perspective, or what they need right now to learn to be more confident at work or more capable in terms of, how they roll things out. But problem solving is the thread, right? And it's a real mindset shift to go from, I'm just going to receive this, to what can I do about this? And I talk to people a lot about this, when you start work, often you sometimes transition into this weird space where you go, oh, well, I'm in a job and I have a job description and, I'll just wait for someone to tell me what to do. And we weirdly, you lose our capacity to problem solve. And so it's really about building that back into teams and building, I guess, that skill of, what would I call it, like initiative and I can do this to come through. And then they start to actually reframe everything they do, not just learning, right? To go, here's an opportunity, and question why things are done.
This is such an interesting point because Doug and I, our team is small, right? But it's new. We're all norming and storming and forming and learning how we work together. And taking initiative was definitely one thing that was important to everyone, even people who joined, and us is looking for people. Like, you don't want someone who just is wait to be told what to do, especially in a small company. There's way too much work to be done. How do you go about instilling that in people? Like, what are the 3 things you can do to help people have that sense of initiative and take initiative?
Yeah, I think as leaders, we need to set like clear boundaries and guidelines, right? Around like, here is our vision, our mission, our values. Here's what we're trying to achieve here, like our goals for the business, right? And then give people the autonomy and the agency to operate within that. Because at the end of the day, you need to trust that you've hired smart, capable people who know how to deliver within that space. And it comes with it a bit of a change shift, right? And that's a change for the leader and a change for the person. And so I think, what often happens when we go into an organization is we need to think harder about how we promote that sense of agency, because it's often taken away. And then we have these problems with the words like empower in culture, because I don't feel empowered if you're just going to keep telling me what to do, right? And so one of the things I would do, like coming back to your 3 things, I think autonomy is a big driver for people at work in terms of their motivation, is here are the clear boundaries and guidelines of how we want to work in this particular area and the goal. And then quite simply using coaching questions like, Una, what do you think you can do there? What is your next best step? How does that look? Where will you go from there? And from using those kind of questions in your language as a team, then you're starting to, without overtly saying it, promote this sense of autonomy and agency.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like with those questions, you get the other person to think about what they can do versus just wait for an answer.
Yeah, exactly. And then because otherwise as a leader, what you're doing is creating this cycle of reliance where they'll just keep coming back to you all the time, right? And it's like a boomerang. You don't want a boomerang. Yeah, you want to actually grow.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, I saw on the beautiful Learner app website.
It is beautiful.
It is very beautiful. The phrase future fit workplace. And I've never heard that before. Can you shed some light onto that phrase?
Yeah, 100%. So what's happening with work, right? And I don't really want to use the word AI, but we'll use the word AI, is that things are shifting and people are feeling a little bit disrupted. There's also we've got some economic conditions going on that are making people feel quite uncertain. We need to keep an eye on where we all want to go. And those kind of skills are resilience, adaptability, change, stress, communication. Those are fundamentally human skills that will allow us to be future fit. Because when we're going through this turmoil and this change in the moment, we need to keep our eye. It's almost like keeping your hands on the steering wheel and your eyes on the horizon, right? And so the future fit workplace is one that has these skills inherently baked that nothing can take away from that once you build those.
So here you are. It's been a little over a year, maybe, since you found March.
Call it 18 months. Yeah, let's call it 18
March?
months.
Okay, March 2023. Is that around
the time?
I'll go
Jan 23. Yeah, it's official start date.
So, all right. So pretty new, pretty young founder. What's your biggest learning so far in the 18 months that you've been working at this? I'm so curious.
Oh my gosh, time, Doug. Time is 100% my biggest learning because I had this feeling that I could just do all these things, right? And there's always something coming at you as a founder. There's product, there's sales, there's customers, there's everything happening all at once, and there's evolution of that. And so I made the mistake, I think, in the first, let's call it 18 months, even though we're 18 months in, of assuming that I could just do all the things and I could just work all the hours to achieve it. And I was talking to a friend of mine and she said, you're really confusing your capacity with your capability. And if you think about those two things and think about, I only have a certain amount of time in the day, how am I going to get the most value out of that time? Because you can't work 24 hours a day. That's just not sustainable, right? And the work that you're doing later on is not good. So how are you filling that tank up? How are you thinking about time as value and how you get value out of that? And then go from there. And so it's really helped me reset how I structure my days, where I spend my time, just setting up focus for the week, goal setting, having systems in place to actually move forward at a pace that's, I guess, sustainable growth.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it, Una?
So familiar. We have been talking, whether it's one person or 4 people or 20 people, you can always, there's always more work that can be done, right?
Yes, it's the nature of work, right? It doesn't end.
Exactly. It never stops, right? Especially in this type of work that the 3 of us are doing, right? Versus, going to do your shift and coming home. There's work that too. So we talk about focus.
Do you ever slightly daydream of one of those? They're just clock off.
Wouldn't
at 5
it be
o'clock.
nice, right?
Yeah. But then no, I'm no, I actually love what I'm doing and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But we talk about this focus, right? I have a friend who's an executive coach and she always talks about brutal focus, right? You have to focus on a thing and move it forward versus trying to do 5 things at the same time and do nothing actually. And it feels so good when you focus and you get it done, right?
Yeah,
now you
have to teach yourself that, right?
Exactly. Now you don't have to think about it. So I'm curious, how can you give us a glimpse into your day? Like, how do you structure it? What are the big building blocks?
I have, but there's probably two parts to that as well, like what you were saying around focus. Like, I think first of all, you have to recognize this problem. And I mentioned before, I'm a coach as well. And I use a lot of self-coaching questions to get myself out of that space, because sometimes you have to catch yourself, right? And one of those questions is, if I'm saying yes to this, what am I saying no to? And once you ask that question of yourself, you go, ooh. And that can be anything, right? Like, if I'm saying yes to this, am I saying no to exercising or sleeping or focusing on product, etc.? But once you do that and sound it out, you go, oof, okay, this is a good question to start with. So now I'm quite structured in my weeks in terms of, I have days where I'm virtual. I have days where I'm traveling around, meeting people face to face. I have time blocks for a lot of things. And I also have like blocks for tasks as well, because what I was doing in the first 18 months was just like letting all these things happen to my diary, and then just like turning up and going, what just happened, and why do I feel like I need to lie down on the floor now? Like, that was exhausting. And so, yeah, the more that structure and system you can put in place, I think the better.
That's great. Yeah, I found that one of the key things is learning how to let go of stuff, because as a founder, you care about everything, right?
I'm sure.
And so practicing letting go was really the key that unlocked everything for me. Just getting to the point where I wasn't stressed about all the little details, but it was not easy. And so I'm kind of curious, how is that for you? Are you able to just let somebody come in and do something that you've been doing? And can you shed some light into that?
Yeah, especially as like a recovering perfectionist, right? Exactly. That's hard, because you go, I wanted everything to be like done like this and spaced like this, so like right down to the nuances. But like, coming back to that like capacity capability piece, I'm like, if I dwell in that, I am not getting X, Y, and Z done. That's just not like physically or humanly possible. So having to let that go. I've got an operations manager who is like my right-hand wing woman in terms of setting things up now. And we've had to, get into a groove of what I like, what I don't like, what I think that should look like, especially because as a founder, you're so connected to the product. Like, what it should be and how it should feel and what it should look like. And it's in here, right? And it's in here, my head and heart, right? But sometimes it's hard to articulate that. And you can't articulate that to the nth degree, right? So I think, coming back to that leadership piece of going, boundaries, like, here's how I want it to feel. And then people surprise you, right? Like, my operations manager, Liz, like, the way that she works with customers and stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so much better than me at that. That was amazing, that email.
Imagine Learna is 5 years old and you have 50 employees and customers all over the world. I'm curious, will you hire a head of HR or people and culture? Or will you kind of lead that and be the operation and hire an operations person to do the HR benefits and all the things that have to be done? How does a former head of people think about that?
Oof. That's a great question, Una. I think, like, inherently, I'd still want to be somewhat connected to it. So, like, strategically, I'd be across it. I also would love to bring in people and culture people who think like product people into Learna to do more operational type roles, because I think there is so much untapped talent out there who work across people and culture who could be great operational and product people. So I might bring people in, but in different roles.
That's really interesting. Yeah. That's really forward
tell
looking.
Us more about that.
Yeah,
tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I want, when I grow, I want, the customer success type operations people to come from people and culture background, because they can talk the same language, they've been through the same processes, they know how to embed things, or even people who have come from some kind of change management background, because fundamentally, when you're putting new initiatives into the people and culture space, you are putting a change piece in place. And so I want people to come with those skills that can actually support customers and empathize with the position that they're in.
How do you instill the product mindset in people and culture teams and people? Because at least in my experience, it's not inherent in the HR community necessarily, right? It's a little bit more process focused, but that's just what I have learned so far. So how do you help people? How do you use Learna app to help
process
instill the
of
product mindset into an operational role.
Yeah, I often talk to them about, when they're onboarding it, what is your intention, like to create with your culture? And sometimes it takes people off guard because they're like, my intention. Like, yes, like what do you want to, what do you want to create? How do you want people to feel? What does success look like? That's very productive, right? And like, oh, what does success look like? Because often they're going through the policies and process and procedure and going, I have to put this in place, I have to put this in place. And it's like, yes, job done. I'm like, not really job done, because like when you're impacting change, you need to be thinking about, okay, my intention is this, my core audience is this, here's what success looks like, here are the social norms, and here's what I'm going to reward once that starts taking place, because you're fundamentally wanting people to adopt something. And so I talk a lot about change management with, potential customers or current customers of Learna and how they get that adoption and people moving forward. Because sometimes it's not actually about the product, right? It's about what are the systems around it that support, that enable that product to also be successful. And, you guys would know this with Hey Taco. Part of the challenge is getting people from 0 to 1, like 0 actions to 1 action.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think my role is like supporting the people and culture team in doing that.
After you and I talked, Lisa, I talked to Doug and I said, she's our people. She thinks the way we think about people as, how do you actually understand the user in anything you do, in any culture related thing? They are the end customer. They're not just someone that has to read your handbook, right? They choose to read your handbook. How do you make it enjoyable for them to read?
There's this saying, there's a saying in Australia, I don't know if you have it, like there's no I in team. You know that saying? Yeah, but there actually is, right? There is an I, because there's an I in like I am responsible for how I show up and I am responsible for how I behave and come to this business. Because like when you have these sayings like there is no I in team, that brings you back to like I am the boss and I will direct you what to do and you will ask me questions and I will tell you the answer, right? We've got to break that down and get people as part of the solution, not just, driving change through them.
I have one more question or 2 questions. I'm going to go back to your time at Half Dome.
Yeah.
What was startup phase? You grew a lot. You just came from a completely different functional area. What has been the biggest thing you're proud of in building the team at Half Dome? And what has maybe been the thing that just failed flat on its, and it was just a good learning experience and you can laugh about it now?
The things I was proud of at that time was like working with those founders who were just exceptional, right? Exceptional in the sense of trusting, confident, wanted to try new things and wanted to do the best by people. And they really took a different lens into that. And because of that environment, people wanted to adopt some of the things and, put things in place. And, some of the feedback I used to get from people was like, this has fundamentally changed my leadership style, my career. I'm such a more confident leader. And the things that, we created together, because it was me and the founders in terms of creating that culture, was people just had these big career shifts in terms of their mindset around what they did at work and how they operated, which is incredible, right? So I'll forever be proud of that and what happened there. Fails. I am really impatient and I like things to happen. I'm like, why wouldn't you do it? It's right there. Let's go. And so sometimes I would move too fast through projects. And I had this really great learning early on where like, here's the thing we're putting in place, adopt it. And then, like, what do you think happened? Like, no one adopted it, right? And so I took that learning and then went like, what? Like, this is so good. Like, why would no one want to do this? And went, okay, I need to bring it back. And I actually need to become a lot more user-centric and go like, what are their barriers? Why wouldn't they adopt it? And slow it down to actually then go faster. And so by doing that, I was doing things like, are you guys familiar with the pre-mortem?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
it's like when you get together and you think, what are all the things that could go wrong? Anticipating the failures.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the post is when you talk about
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would definitely have fails where I was trying to initiate new things around like performance development, etc., and them not being adopted as quickly as I liked. And then I learned about this thing called a pre-mortem, which is basically where you get everyone together, you imagine all the things that could go wrong based on what you want to do. And it's so like it's like a relief for them to get it off their chest, like out of their head, right? To go, here's all the things. And then you flip it and go, so how do we prevent those? And then they feel part of the solution because they've just like spent that time with you, that a couple of hours. They go, okay, so what are you going to do as part of this? and like how will we know this is working and how will we come back together? And changing my approach and doing that style of pre-mortem to managing change with like kind of having a task force with them. I'm like, this is not my job. This is our job to get this into the culture and working. That was a good change. So like go slow to go fast.
That's great. Lisa, for anyone listening to this episode who may be just starting their entrepreneurial journey, any words of advice that you can give them?
Have a really good support network around you, because especially if you're a solo operator, it can be really lonely and really hard. And sometimes, you're digging into things and going, am I doing the right thing? So one of the best things I did early on was I've got a couple of really good advisors around me who I can call on and bounce ideas off, who are invested in the business and want to see the success of it. So have people around you that support you, and also, family and friends that are interested and want to know and do whatever they can to help you, even if it's just a conversation to understand what's going on. The other thing would be meet with people who are the founders that are operating in your space, because no one gets it like they do, right? So much like me reaching out to you guys, I connect with a lot of different like HR tech founders because we get it, and we've both been there and we've both been through the same challenges, right? Just different contexts. So the more that you can have that support network wrapped around you, the better.
That's great.
Before we go into gratitude, Doug, I have one more final question.
I was just thinking that because you said you had 2 questions and I think you only asked 1. So.
Oh, okay. I think I bundled my first one into 2. You know when people sometimes say, I have one more question, and they ask three in the same sentence?
Oh, so yes, but I missed it.
No, you didn't. You didn't. I just said I have 2 more questions, and they were 2, but they kind of sounded like 1, so bad counting. But my question is, I saw that you share your learning tips and interesting facts on LinkedIn. It's like, hey, here's a quick kind of Learna in short form.
Yeah.
What is your learning tip for today for someone listening? Super short, something that maybe you share today and you've been thinking about today, or something that you just launched in the Learna app that could help someone who's building a team that's listening to this.
One of the things I've noticed is that, post-COVID and then coming into some tough economic conditions, is that people are really scared of communication and saying the wrong thing and hiding away from feedback, etc. And so my advice would be to just learn 1 or 2 questions that can help you with work. So for example, I was talking to someone the other day about feedback, and she's like, I'm asking my team for feedback all the time and they just don't give it. Like, how are you asking for it? And she's like, oh, well, we just did this project together. Do you have any feedback for me? I'm like, woof, okay. Like, how about you try and say it like this? We've just done this project together. How would you rate my contribution out of 10? And no one gives 10, right? And then you go, okay, Una, thanks for scoring me an 8 out of 10. What would a 10 look like? And then they go, oh, it would look like blah, blah, blah. Like, awesome. Thanks for the feedback. And they've just you've just created this safe space, right? And so my biggest tip would be to arm yourself with some great questions that can help you, build your confidence in those conversations and start to actually build some empathy and connection with others that you work with.
That's a good tip. How you ask really matters. It'll get you different answers, even in customer experience or product or anything like that.
And this comes back to what we were talking about at the start, right? Stop telling, start asking, and build that agency and that initiative back into people, and then go from there. Because, one of the biggest things I learned out of coaching was don't assume that you have all the answers. You don't know everything that's going on or what that person's capable of. So ask the question first.
Well, cool. Let's talk about gratitude. With our app, Hey Taco, everyone has 5 tacos to give each day to show someone some recognition or just to simply put a smile on someone's face. Who are you giving your 5 tacos to today, and why?
Oof. Okay, so I'd have to say 2 would have to go to Janie and Pete, who are some of my advisors who are always there questioning, challenging, teaching me things around Learna. This is my first foray into a product and a startup, so they are incredibly helpful. My best friend Sal and my husband are massive supporters, always there cheering me on, asking how they can help, actually just going out of their way to help me in lots of different ways. And Liz, who's my operations manager, I couldn't do my day-to-day without her. She has become indispensable. So she is definitely getting a taco.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, thank you for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And best of luck with Learna. I'm pretty excited to watch you grow and see what you do when you are 15 people. And if you do hire that HR person, as Una was talking about.
We'll do another episode at that time. Like, let's see how Learna's doing now.
I bring in all the reformed people and culture people who want to be product people and put them into customer success and operations roles.
We would love to record a story about that.
Yes.
And sending positive vibes that we are having this conversation. And what did I say? 5 years? It could be sooner. We don't have to wait
hopefully.
5 years.
Yeah. So let's hope for next year or the year after.
Exactly.
Love it. And thanks for connecting with me. As I said, like I love to build my network and build my connections around amongst HR people, tech people that like to think differently.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for listening. One of the important things about building a team is gratitude. If you're looking to add more gratitude into your team, check out heytaco.com. We are clearly biased, but it really does work. Use the code AMAZINGTEAMS to receive 15% off for the first 3 months of your subscription.